Cache-a-maniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
I'm Daryl W4 here with a crew for the 32nd beta episode of the GeoGearHeads that might make you think you're listening to the geocaching podcast. Before we get into that, back up, why don't you tell us what's coming up next for the next couple of shows?
I'd love to. Since we weren't able to connect with him last week, next week we'll catch up with Ed O'Brien of Brand.34, who will join us by telephone to talk about their acquisition of the GeoMate Junior and what's coming in the GeoMate line. The week after that, we'll be back with the same crew to talk about the opposite of this week's topic.
And this week we're talking about adding a GPSR for cachers whom are used to using a smartphone. And we've got Hide Hard Hat and Xpunk X.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
Now, in 2 weeks, on the 23rd, we're talking about adding a smartphone for cachers who use their GPSRs. For the last show of August, I'm excited to say that we'll be joined by the author of the 5 Reasons Every Geocacher Could Benefit from GSAC, an article on GPS track log. So that's the next 3 episodes, and some great content coming for the rest of August.
And all of those shows will be recorded live through the Google Plus Hangout on Air feature, usually at about 5 to 10 minutes after 9 p.m. Eastern or 6 p.m. Pacific. However, the show on the 23rd will be running about 30 minutes late, so look for that one about 9:40 p.m. Eastern or 6:40 p.m. Pacific. For those on Google Plus, we've added public events that you can use as reminders. Then, at the time, anyone can head over to the GeoGearHeads page on Google Plus to watch for the live stream. We also tried to post the YouTube URL for those live feeds to Twitter, but that unfortunately doesn't always work.
So now we've given you 3 topics to send us questions, comments, or just any type of feedback. Those are the GeoMate Junior and Brand.44, adding a GPSR for smartphone users, and why geocachers still need GSAC. The best way to get those questions on the show is to call our voicemail line at 206-350-3647. As Daryl just mentioned, you can also write those into us through the social media networks like Google+. We haven't turned our back, at least not yet, on the high tech of the last century, though, so you can also send us your email feedback at geogearheads@cacheamaniacs.com.
Now, Native Texan used Google Plus to send her comment on a topic from last week. She wrote that there's another option for URL shortening for geocachers, which works with multiple listing services. Cord, that's COORD.ch, supports geocaching.com, Geocaching Australia, many of the Open Caching Network sites, Terra Caching, and Navicaching, in addition to travelers from both geocaching.com and GeoCredit. We'll link to that in our show notes, and thank you to Native Texan for that.
Well, we're ready to introduce our guests, but just have a couple more of the program notes. First of all, for fans of the old Cachers of the Round Table show, those episodes have finally been okay. For the fans of the old Cachers of the Round Table show, those episodes have been made available on archive.org. But last week, Daryl finally got some of the old cachersoftheroundtable.com domain to correctly map to the Google site, and he's posted those links along with show notes there. So head over there if you'd like to listen to any of those old shows and some great information, even if it is slightly outdated.
Yeah, that's cachersroundtable.com. You can omit the it's just cachersroundtable.com. And it was really kind of a trip down memory lane as I was going back through those show notes. But there's something new coming to Cache-a-Maniacs that I'm pretty excited about, and that's reviews. Next Tuesday, we hope to release the first of the audio shows under the Cache-a-Maniacs review. It's also downloadable MP3, and it's going to be available as a separate YouTube video. So you can grab the feed and download those MP3s, or just watch the videos on YouTube, and in this case, it's going to be on a power bag. Now watch Twitter and Google+, or just head over to cachemaniacs.com after Tuesday, and you should be able to get more on that new feature.
That's really cool and exciting. Hey, let's bring on Head Hard Hat and X-Punk X of the Geocaching Podcast so we can talk more about moving from a GPSR from a smartphone. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the GeoGearHeads.
Hey, thanks.
Hey, thank you. I'll tell you what, I had to take a drink of water, bad cop, just from listening to you do all the dialogue today.
It is interesting being on the guest side of this show. Normally, we're the ones doing the main talking.
Yeah, definitely, and it's nice to have you guys on a little bit different format than we usually do, which is, the Geocaching Podcast on Wednesday nights.
Right.
Yeah, big difference, but this time we're going to be talking about geocaching.
Yeah, as opposed to the geocaching that we talked about on the other show.
Exactly.
It's kind of a little bit of deja vu, I guess.
It is. Didn't we just do this last night?
It certainly seems that way. Although this
feels
time we've got the
more like a
hangout.
Thursday, though.
It is.
Well, let's get down to our topic, and really what we're talking about is people who are moving from their smartphones into a GPSR or complementing their smartphones with a GPSR, because there have been so many people that we've run into who really got their start in geocaching with that iPhone or their Android phone, picked up the app, got started caching, really like it, and then decided that they should add, for whatever reason, a handheld GPSR to the mix. One of the big reasons that people want that is for the better response time and accuracy. One of the things I really say I like about people learning on the smartphone is that they build that geosense. And for those of us who have gotten used to the new high-accuracy GPSRs, we kind of expect to walk right up to it. Ground zero is ground zero, and the cache should be there. And that's one nice thing is the smartphone users learn to look for it a little bit more. So they tend to build their geosense much more than most of us who are used now to these high-accuracy GPSRs.
I know that's the case for me. I know that when I go and switch, from using the high-accuracy GPSR back to using just my smartphone, I walk up and then I would get frustrated that I can't find the cache that should be there, but it's not, just because I'm so used to having my handheld GPSR, and then I move back to the smartphone, and it's just not there. It's not the same.
Yeah, I do find it really ironic how the pendulum is swung the other way, where originally geocaching was done nothing but with GPSR units. Then this wonderful bit of functionality fell in our hands with the smartphones, and now we're going back. We're going back because we enjoy getting out there. We enjoy getting more and more into the trails, and now we've got these really high-tech, nifty toys to play with. Yeah, the accuracy is great, but even then, when they use a smartphone, one of the best bits of advice we can always tell them is just when you're getting close to ground zero, put that thing in your pocket, start looking anyways.
Yeah, that holds true of the GPSR, the smartphone, or just about anything. If you're using a map, how many people did we talk to years ago? Not so much since smartphones have become so prevalent, but who would print out the Google Maps and use that to try to do FTFs.
Right.
Then it's still the same thing. You walk toward the pin, you look for a landmark from the satellite view, and you just walk toward it and start looking.
Oh, look, a lamppost.
Yeah, or it's that tree that's sitting there in the middle of the field.
Right.
With nothing else around it. Where could this be?
Yeah, well, another reason a lot of people want to go to GPSR is because it doesn't require any subscription or data signal to make the thing work. So when you're going out in the field and you're outside of cell range, or in a lot of places now, you're really worried about how much data you're burning through, because you're being charged for your data now more than you were when the smartphones first came out. So a lot of people are going for that just to save the money on the data and to have the no worries about the signal. You can use a smartphone if you go and cache your maps and cache your caches, but you have to go through all that work, and the smartphones work well that way. It's just, if you're going to go through all that work, why not just get a GPSR?
Right. Exactly. Well, I think too that's one of the major things to remember too when you move from this smartphone to the GPSR is you're not going to have all of that data with you. I mean, you're just going to basically have the map and the point, and you may be able to, depending on which unit you have. Obviously a lot of the newer units now have the ability to take the GPX files into it, and so you're going to get some of that information. They're going to have that caching mode where you can do things like the field notes and have some little bit of the logs and things like that, but you're not going to have that up to date. You have to remember you have to load this stuff. It doesn't just come to you like it did on the smartphone. You may not have the log that someone just logged a minute ago because your GPX file that you loaded to it may be 2, 3, 4 days out of date. And so, since that time you pulled that GPX file to it, 4 people may have DNF'd the cache.
It's interesting that we are now, again, it's interesting how things change from one to the other and back again. No more unlimited data, just like Daryl had said. And that really is a major point, and I think that really stuck to me just now when you said that, because I just recently upgraded my phone, which meant a new plan, which meant I only get X amount of gigs worth of data per month. And now to be able to get charged these huge fees, I'm going to be using that GPSR a lot more, just for that very reason, because us, we're all in the media, we're all doing different things in the social networking, and we need it for that. And the GPS, we know how much that sucks up data for just a simple few caches. So that is an excellent point.
Yeah, and one of the things too is you can go and cache all that data on the phone and not have to go through that. The maps, generally, that's a different story. You can't really do that. But even then, if you're going to be out in the middle of nowhere, you want to have a separate unit so that you're not relying on your phone as your one and only device that's going to be able to get you in and out and act as your lifeline to the outside world. So it's really a good idea to have something like the GPSR, which you can use for your navigation. Keep your phone, safely packed up so that it's not going to fall in the water and get fried. And we just heard not too long ago about a couple of young men who went out and only had the iPhone between them. There was no other phones. They had no other navigation devices. They killed their iPhone by dropping it in the water and couldn't get back out. So that's a really big concern, is being able to have some alternative and not worry about it. But also the battery life. You get so much more battery life if you're not using the GPSR on your smartphone. And the GPSRs tend to be a lot better because they don't have the cellular radios to worry about either. So it's kind of one of those things, you combine both functions, the GPS and the radio, and you kill that battery in your cell phone pretty quick. If you separate them out into 2 separate units, you're going to find that it's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, and keep in mind, you can go out for days on a couple of AA's with a GPSR, leave that thing on most of the time, and which allows you, your tracking and other features that you want to use with it. That battery lasts forever. And I can't think of too many units where it doesn't, a pair of batteries isn't going to get you, 12, 14, 18 hours sometimes, depending on how much you're using it, as opposed to that, 1.5 hours that you need for that cell phone. And I'll tell you what, if you get stuck somewhere, I want to have as full a battery on my cell phone as I can if I need to make a phone call.
Right, and the nice thing about having the standalone GPSR too is then you, like you said, you leave it on all day, and you have the whole track log from the whole day. You can go back, you can map it in Google Earth, map it anywhere you want to map it. Take a look at all of the tracks that you went and see, how crazy you went. You may have went down 6 wrong turns, and you can see that.
That never happens.
Well, okay, maybe not to you, but it does to Chris, I can tell.
Only 5 wrong turns.
All right.
Recently, I did a Terrain 5 cache, and I took the GPSR because I wanted. It was a long trip out to where we were going, and I didn't want to burn the phone. Plus, on a Terrain 5 cache, I didn't want to necessarily have to hold the phone while I'm trying to go up and down, a sheer cliff with it. I'd rather just stick the GPS in my pocket, knowing that, hey, if I bump it on a rock, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry so much about water damage. So if it starts drizzling when you're out, or if you get sprayed by that waterfall, you're not going to have a problem. And let's face it, most GPSRs are some form of waterproofed or water resistant. So if you drop them, if you drop them in the river and you pull them right back out, generally you're not going to have too much trouble with it. You can't say that about a cell phone.
No,
Not at all.
Well, it's I think pretty much the stress test for a GPSR is I think what they're saying about 4 or 5 feet for about 30 minutes is the outer limits for something like that. Most of the time, hopefully, we see it fall in, we grab down and get it, and if it does take a few extra minutes to get that out of the water, it's not going to hurt it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think most of these are just being dipped in the water as you've got it in the lanyard around your neck, and you bend down and you realize, oh, my GPS is underwater at the moment.
I know
More
it's
than
plenty of
actually being
people who
dropped.
have. I know plenty of people who have dropped their GPS into river or whatever, and they can see it glowing at the bottom and can't figure out how to get it back out. That's especially bad when you're at the ferry dock, and we actually knew someone who did that.
not good.
So,
I'm thinking bad memories are with us.
Yeah, well, that wasn't ours,
Okay.
but we've talked many times on various shows about doing that Mackinac event, and someone getting off the boat, off the ferry, onto the island, dropped their GPS as they were getting off, and it's between the ferry and the dock, and they could see it glowing.
Man.
There's nothing you can do.
As it sinks slowly deeper.
But
Well, no, it wasn't that deep there. It's at the dock, so you can see it, but it's still too
Somebody's
far.
got to
Somebody's
take the plunge. Yes.
I would rather have that happen than my
they're not going to
smartphone.
let you do that because the ferry's right there. But as you were just saying, you don't want to have that happen to your smartphone.
Exactly.
Yeah, think of that in contrast. I mean, what do we always suggest to people? Make sure you have that Ziploc bag for you in case you get sprinkles. I mean, it's a little bit of a difference with the smartphone as opposed to a GPS.
Definitely. Now, we've talked a lot about why you should get a GPSR. But one of the big problems, if you do go for a GPSR and you're used to the smartphone, is all of the planning that's really required when you are using that smartphone. And Xpunk X, you touched on it right off the bat,
Right.
that you have to get these things loaded up and you have to worry about how out of date that information is going to be.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't use their GPSs as much once they get smartphones, myself included.
Yeah, me too.
Typically, when I go out, I don't bother with the GPS because I've got the smartphone. And that's just quick and easy.
Right, and we've gotten so used to this, having this live data connection to our phones all the time, that for me, I'm not out doing most of these I'm doing mostly urban hunts, in and around my town, and I'm not going out into the woods as much as I used to. And so for me, it's just as easy to use the smartphone. But again, for me, I really like the accuracy of the GPSR. That's one of the main draws to it, is the accuracy. And I forgot because I had been so long. Since I actually loaded my GPSR up. I loaded it up for the trip we took recently, and I forgot, okay, how did I do this with GSAC? I mean, I did it, then I remembered, I can set the found, not found things, but then I'm like, oh, wait, I'm also going to have my phone with me, so I can have that data in there also. But, for me, it was kind of a remembering, this is how you do it. But in the long run, I think that it works out a lot better, because I think GSAC ends up making you plan a little bit more, and you have a little bit more features with it as far as the filtering goes and things like that. And so you plan and you call your data a little bit more than you would if you're just on a smartphone.
Well, and that's one of the things is that I actually do load the GPX files on my smartphone. I don't do the live data usually, but I do all of my finds and everything right in the smartphone. And when you're doing that from the GPSR, typically you don't have a very good interface to do those finds if you want to say limit it just to traditional caches that are, a 2.2 or something like that. You don't have an easy way of doing that. Certainly not as easy as you can on most of the smartphone apps. So even though I'm going through and loading that GPX file, it's so much more friendly to do it on the smartphone than it is on the GPS. So this is one of the reasons why I like having both. When I do take the GPSR, I'm still using my smartphone, and I still use that for doing all the logging because it is so much easier.
Right.
And I can go and find the caches. I can figure out which one I'm going to do right on the smartphone, and then I use the GPS just for that navigation, basically.
You know, on the flip side of that, though, you also have the ability with GPSR units is what I kind of call carpet bombing when it comes to areas. So, in other words, unless you're taking a trip someplace that you don't normally go, a lot of times if you're getting pocket queries, it's for areas that you normally cache in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do need to do a couple more pocket queries to pull in a more widespread area around some place that you normally go because you think you're going to hit the fringes, there's a lot of storage space you can do. And they still do SD cards where you can pop it in. It has a lot of storage on it where you can have multiple GPX files in there and just really blanket an area if you need it.
Yeah, and that does depend a lot on which unit it is that you have.
Right.
Some of the older units, like the old original E-Trex that a lot of people used, were very limited to as few as like...
500?
I think 500.
500?
Well,
yeah, was it 1,000 maybe?
No, the E-Trex, the original E-Trex were limited to 500 at most, but I want to say that there were even some of those that were limited to only 100. And I'm currently working on testing the Explorist 110, and that one is also limited to 500.
Really?
So
Wow.
A lot of these GPSRs don't have a whole lot of capability for handling that many caches.
Right.
So that is a real concern. And the other problem is with smartphones, a lot of people are going out without that premium membership for geocaching.com. If you're looking to do GPX files, you have to have the premium membership on geocaching.com to get those.
Yeah,
now, if you're using one of the third-party listing services, that's not a big deal.
Right, and that's the same thing that I ran into when I just loaded this GPS up for our trip. You know, I ran into where I had, even though I only had my Pocket Query having like 1,000 caches in it, with the alternative waypoints that are in it, you know, the child waypoints and everything like that, there was more than, 1,000, I think 14 or something like that. My GPS only held 1,000, so I needed to call that back down, to where I could get it and make it work onto the GPS. I totally forgot about that, when I was doing that, because it's been so long since I loaded it. So that is one of the downsides of loading your GPSR as opposed to a smartphone is a lot of the, medium to older ones do have this limit.
Yeah, I think I'm
talking about something that requires more pieces of the puzzle to make it function, because you have to have that computer, you have to load it in, and with the smartphone, you're doing everything right on the smartphone. So if something goes a little bit wonky, you know right away, and you can address it right away. And you don't. The problem is if something goes wonky on the cell phone, you know about it when you're trying to find a cache. If you're doing it with a GPSR, you're sitting in front of your computer, working on trying to get that done usually, so you'll know most of the time ahead of time that something's going wrong. And you do have to deal with a number of different programs depending on what you want to do. With the Magellan units, I like to use their Vantage Point, which is kind of nice because all I have to do is open the software, tell it which pocket query I want to load into the GPSR, and it goes and loads it. And with these Explorist units, it's really nice because it actually loads those photos in, so you get that nice description like we're used to with the smartphones.
Yeah.
The other units, you have to go through a lot more work if it supports images at all to get that stuff in there. But one of the things I like with almost any of these new units that do support the paperless caching is typically what they'll call it, is all you have to do is drag and drop, so you don't necessarily even need any software. All you have to do is mount it as a disk on your computer and drag that GPX file into the right spot. So if you're doing something like a hotel and just using one of their computers, you can just download that GPX file and drop it right onto the unit and not have to go through any software. And I'm kind of interested to find out if anyone's been able to get the on-the-go functionality of a lot of the new Android phones to work, so that they can use just their Android phone in the field to do live loads of the GPX files right there.
I have not done that yet, but it's on my list of things to do. I think what happens with a case like that is you get so spoiled with the real-time, having it right there at your fingertips. I almost never think about having the backup of the .gpx file unless I'm going on a special trip someplace.
Yeah, that's definitely something to remember is with any GPSR, you are going to have to go through this. It's not optional anymore. You
Yes.
have to go through it. However, I do actually know some people who will hand enter codes off their smartphone because they just have the smartphone as their primary device and then keep the GPSR around as I need to do that. And when we go out on our caching runs, most of the time there's at least 2 other GPSRs in the group. So I'll bring the GPSR and I never even look at it because by the time I get out to the cache, or because I'm always looking at the description on my smartphone. So by the time I've read off the description, told people what it is. They either have it or they're at ground zero. So why do I even have the GPSR?
So Daryl, you're not doing much of the actual finding these days, are you?
Well, I actually haven't done too much of that lately, but no, a lot of the time it's, okay, the GPS tells me ground zero is here, I don't see it, and then everyone goes and hunts around. So you already know where ground zero is from the folks who have the GPSR. And I'm the guy who usually tends to read through the description and pass the relevant information to the rest of the group. So, I've got my nose in the smartphone while everyone else is looking for the cache.
Well, if anything, it's a good thing to have the GPSR just to mark where the car is. I mean, obviously for park and grabs, it's no big deal. But if you've got that where you've got tracking on, you've got where the car marked, and you don't look at it or need to unless you do need to, that's when it comes in handy.
Mm-hmm. And if you need the GPS to get back from a parking grab, you shouldn't be geocaching.
Oh, boy. I ran into someone the other day who I just thought, there is no way these people should be geocaching because there were only like 4 or 5 cars in the parking lot and they couldn't figure out how to get to their car. I'm dead serious. I'm not joking.
Oh.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And I have heard problems with people who have really bad spatial recognition. So I'm thinking that's what they were running into. But boy, that was kind of scary to see that.
Wow.
They were getting help from a security guard to find their car of the 5 cars in the parking lot.
I'm bad, but I'm not that bad.
Stay away from the trails.
Yeah.
All right, so getting back to GPSRs. Now that we've kind of given people reasons why they should and shouldn't get a GPSR to use with their smartphone, and I really do think that that's the best way to go, is keep your smartphone, continue to use that for things like the paperless caching, because
And the logging.
Logging, because it is a better screen, it's a better keyboard than you're going to find on any of the GPSRs right now.
Yes.
So that's one of the things to look at is how are you really going to use that GPSR? There's a bunch of different things to look at, including budget and everything else. But even before I'd look at that, are you going to use that paperless functionality or not? And in most cases, we don't use the functionality if it's just one of us. When we've got multiples in the group and we're looking to give a GPSR to like the kids, they're actually going to use that. So think about that. If you've got kids that you're going to go out with, or if you're taking someone new out, or something like that, you probably are going to want that paperless functionality in the unit.
Yeah, I think we all get asked from time to time by our viewers, what is the best GPS for me? And I think for the case like that, obviously budget's a huge thing. How much do you want to spend for it? If they sit there and say $50, right away, this is what you're going to end up with. But I agree totally with Daryl. It does definitely mean, are you going to actually use it? You're not going to want to pay $500-$600 for a GPS unit. You're going to use twice a year.
Right.
Well, one of the nice things is because you have that smartphone and you probably aren't going to need the paperless, you can look at some of the older units that didn't have the functionality that most of the current geocachers are looking for, like the GPS Map 60 series, which was really, really excellent gear. That stuff was really built well, very, very accurate, but by today's standards, the screens weren't very good. They didn't have a whole lot of capabilities of cache storage. They don't do any GPX files. You have to load it through something like GSAC or a plugin or something like that. So those have kind of fallen out of favor for cachers, except as a secondary unit If you've got something like a new unit that does the paperless caching or a smartphone, people are still using those as their backup units. They're using them to help hide the caches because they're still very, very accurate. But you're going to find them on eBay and Craigslist very inexpensively. And that's probably a good place to look if you're not going to want all of the paperless functionality in your GPSR.
Yep.
Right. As long as it has an arrow and distance, that's really all I'm looking for. Tell me how far and which way to go to find the cache.
It's just funny because I find that a lot of times that I found more caches with my GPSR that only had, basic maps and, like you said, an arrow and a thing, more than I do with my smartphone. With my smartphone, I get too relying on the fact that I think it should be where the Google map is. If I look at the aerial view and it's not where it's at, then I get really frustrated. It's not there. And I'm losing my geosense, I think, because I'm using the smartphone.
I think one of the things that is very important that you see as a general functionality with GPSR units, it is really nice to have the topo abilities to know if that geocache is on this side of the stream or that side of the stream.
Yeah, but I have to say that I've had a lot of problems with the topo maps on the Garmin units. It's not exclusive to the Garmin units, but that's mostly what I've cached with that's had the topos. And the DeLorme maps have been so much better than the Garmin maps for topo that I've used. But all too often, we'll go on like a half or mile hike around this stream only to find out that the map is wrong and that stream is actually on the other side of the cache. So we're on the side that we thought it was supposed to be on, but we've got a stream between us and the cache.
No.
That's when to put the phone in the Ziploc baggie and swim across.
Well, one of the things that we actually mentioned, though, was that ability to do the drag and drop of the GPX files and possibly doing something, loading through your card or through the on-the-go cabling directly to the unit. Things like that GPS Map 60 are not going to support that. You have to have one of those newer units in order to do that. So that's another reason why you might want to go for a newer unit. And again, you can still find a lot of those on eBay or Craigslist. But having that paperless functionality can allow some more capabilities to interact with things like your smartphone or your tablet if that's where you want to go.
Right, and one of the downsides that I've found too with the GPSR, I mean, granted they work better, but say you're on a trip, say you're on a road trip with a family and a group of people, you say you're going to go down such and such a route. I plan for that. I have my GPS loaded for that, and then all of a sudden we decide to go somewhere else, and I don't have those files. It's happened to me before. So then you're quickly pulling over at a rest stop, trying to open up the laptop, try to see if there's Wi-Fi there to download a new Pocket Query and go from there. So in that essence, like, it is a lot harder to use. Even with the drag and drop, you're not going to have that live functionality. So again, I would say make sure you keep your smartphone, because I've had that happen where the GPSR ends up being wrong because we went a completely separate way. But I have the smartphone, I can open it up and still find that if there's going to be rest stop caches or what along the way.
Well, how many times have we taken our laptops and our netbooks and gone that way, and now everybody's going tablet? One of the things that is very handy when you have a smartphone that has the capability for making itself into a hotspot when you need to, you can always pull through, and I've had tablets where you can pull it right through the Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth right through the phone, and that helps out. So the technology's there. You just have to have the right combination for whatever you're going to come into. Granted, that's a lot of moolah. That's a lot of bucks, and a lot of people may not be able to do that. All you can do is what your budget allows and enjoy it and use what you have. And I'll tell you what, a lot of creativity comes when those situations come around.
That's right. The GPSR requires more upfront planning than the cell phone does. There's no doubt.
Well, and one of the nice things, if your GPS does have a card, and most of those will take a SD card derivative of some type, a lot of the Android users I've run into use some kind of file manager and can actually go and load the files right onto the card. If you have an iOS device, there are some workarounds to do the same kind of thing. So if you have a phone that has some kind of capability of dealing with the cards and your GPS has those cards, many times you can actually just do that, so you don't even have to do the tethering, and you can get away from the requirement to have another device in the car with you.
Yeah, I actually used Astro on the Android as a file manager to do that. What I was very pleasantly surprised is that on the Galaxy S3, which is what I upgraded to, that file manager is built in now. So that's a good plus.
Definitely. Now, the downside is most of the newer smartphones coming out, unless they're at the really high end, seem to be eliminating the SD cards completely.
Yeah, that is a trend.
Mm-hmm.
So there is going to be a time, I think, very soon when that's not going to be an option for very much longer. So that's where the things like that USB on the go that Android is working with now really comes in handy. And that's a functionality that must be built into your device, your tablet, your smartphone. Yeah. It's not just an OS thing. It has to be on the device.
Right.
So if your device doesn't support it, it's not going to. Give it up. So we've talked about a lot of these different GPSRs and what to kind of look for. Don't forget that there are options like the Magellan Explorer series, the Garmin Oregon, the Coda, the new eTrex, the new 62. We can just keep naming these things off that do provide that full cache support. So if you're looking for something that's more of a replacement for the smartphone, and you can just use your smartphone to go back to making calls and looking up that relevant information that you need on a moment's notice.
The pizza place where you need to go after.
I'll tell you what, that is a plus.
You've got all of those options, and that's really what you should be looking at. If you're just looking for something to supplement the phone, which is basically what I tend to do, I do most of my caching on the phone and just use the GPS to help guide me to the cache, then you can look at some of those older, cheaper units and be very, very happy. Now, of course, remember that a GPS isn't going to be 100% accurate. Even the best GPS is still going to be, at best, about a 30-foot accuracy. The person who hid that cache, at best, is going to be a 30-foot accuracy. So if you're 50 feet off with a GPSR, that's still pretty good. That's not like it's going to be that odd. And that's one thing that a lot of people have tended to forget in the recent years, because they're so used to these high-accuracy GPSRs that do seem like they're better than 30-foot accuracy.
Yeah, put them in your pocket, start looking, and get that geosensor going.
Yeah, and if you're within 50 feet, guess what? You are at ground zero.
That's right.
Yeah, don't go complaining.
Actually, that's part of the fun, I mean, you keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it till the fun runs out, and there's plenty of times that happens, but that's, X does not mark the spot in geocaching. It's just how it is.
That's when you grab that smartphone and phone a friend.
That's exactly right.
All right, so we've had a lot of discussion here tonight about adding a GPS to a smartphone, and we'd love to hear maybe some problems, maybe some success stories from people who have had the smartphone and decided to add in the GPS, and if they've used the GPS exclusively or if they're using it as a supplement. So, we'll talk about those a little bit in a couple of weeks. Just make sure to get those comments into us.
And check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback about going to a GPSR by calling area code 206-350-3647, by emailing geogearheads@cachemaniacs.com, or through social media. Your support helps keep this Cachemaniacs show coming. Please consider making a PayPal donation through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. This show is copyright 2012 by Daryl Wattenberg, all rights reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.